Women's Day. My name is Sunita Vyas, and I'm the National Co-Convener at Canada India Foundation. Today, on behalf of CIF, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our esteemed panelists and audience for taking time out from the extremely busy schedule to participate in our Women's Day event designed to discuss DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I would also like to welcome Consul General of India in Toronto, Ms. Apurva Srivastavaji, for joining us for the virtual Women's Day celebration as a special guest. Friends, before we start a formal program, just wanted to talk briefly about the organization. Canada India Foundation is a not for profit, non partisan organization that works on fostering bilateral relations between Canada and India. As part of our ongoing efforts, we've organized various forums in the past, forums which are of vital interest to Canada and India, such as Infrastructure Forum, Education Forum, and Health Forums, that enables a better understanding of the relationship between India and Canada. Our next Healthcare Forum will be held virtually on May 20th to 21st, 2021. CIF organizes annually charity golf tournaments and donates the proceeds of the tournament to families of fallen soldiers in Canada and India. Annually, we also recognize and honor an individual with the Global Indian Award. CIF's Global Indian Award is presented every year to an outstanding person who has demonstrated global leadership, vision, and personal excellence. Award also carries a prize money of $50,000, which can be donated to the charity of the award recipient's choice. Our recipients in the past have been Stephen Harper, former Prime Minister of Canada, Narayan Murthy, founder Infosys, Deepak Chopra, Ratan Tata, Yoga Guru Baba Ramdev. Today is our first virtual event on the International Women's Day. And without further ado, I would like to invite our chair, Mr. Satish Tucker, to please say a few words and introduce our special guest of the night, Ms. Apurva Srivastavaji, Consul General of India in Toronto. Mr. Tucker is a Canadian entrepreneur and has many various commercial, my bad, has a business conglomerate which has executed various commercial and residential development projects. Satish is a pioneer in popularizing yoga, Ayurveda, and mindful living in Canada. He's also the past president of Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce. Please welcome Mr. Satish Tucker.
Thank you so very much, Sunita. I'm very glad to join you all on a day that will hopefully begin a new tradition in the CIF's event calendar. This year, CIF is marking the International Women's Day by hosting a panel discussion on the issues that critically affect the outcome for women in the society. The United Nations theme for the year is Choose to Challenge, and the CIF's Women Committee decided diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how each applies to women as the topic for this webinar. Some of you are familiar with the work we do at CIF. As Sunita mentioned, for the benefit of others who are participants here, I would like also to reiterate that CIF represents a group of eminent Indo-Canadian entrepreneurs who are committed to see the Canada-India bilateral ties thrive in every field, that is social, cultural, investment, trade, and strategic. We like to call this a 360-degree engagement. The theme of the International Women's Day that falls on March 8 is Choose to Challenge. Question the status quo over diversity, equity, and inclusion. And today we have a situation where the laws of the land favor the growth and progress of women, but certainly cultural norms and practices, entrenched attitude may be holding women back from realizing their true potential. There are certainly women, including from the Indo-Canadian community, who have risen above the roadblocks and prejudice to be in a position that demand not just women, but everyone's respect and admiration. At the same time, let's be honest and admit that there are scores of women for whom equity and inclusion are mere words and have no impact on their lives. What needs to be done? How can we carry these progressive ideas to a maximum number of people? Should we start educating our sons and daughters on the gender equality and inclusion at home? We are looking forward to the upcoming panel discussion where these and other points of interest will be discussed. A very special thanks to CIF's Women Committee members, of course, CIF National Co-Convener Sunita Vyas, our Secretary Hema Bhatt, Board of Governor member Vesh Sharma and Indra Kurana for this great initiative. And in keeping with the theme, you will have noticed that our panel includes both women and men. Mr. Lawrence Atta, CTO, City of Toronto, Ms. Anita Dharmshi, Board of Director, Oakville Hospital Foundation, Mr. Harris Rosen, Principal Lawyer, Harris Rosen Professional Corporation, and Dr. Chitra Anand, Technology Advisor, Ms. Lisa Metam, CEO, Sahaja, and very special thank you on behalf of Canada India Foundation for taking time out to join on this session and on for this very interesting as well as timely topic. And before we begin the panel discussion, let me invite our very special guest, Ms. Apurva Shrivastava, the Consul General of India in Toronto. She's a career diplomat and with over 2 decades of very illustrious experience at the Ministry of External Affairs, serving in embassy in Paris and Kathmandu, Nepal, and various other departments. She has worked with some of the very finest politicians of India, like late Srimati Sushma Swaraj. And for the last year and a half working with CIF, we have experienced nothing but one of the very finest human beings with the rarest of the quality of razor sharp focus, very proactive, very innovative thinking to initiate. We have started many initiatives together and very proud to call her a friend of CIF's. Please help me in welcoming her. Over to you, Sushma Apurva ji. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Namaskar. Thank you, Satish ji, for such great introduction. I don't know if I'm worthy for that, but thank you nonetheless. First of all, I'm delighted to be here for this, this panel discussion on occasion of International Women's Day. And thank you, CIF, for organizing this wonderful panel. And I'm honored to be among such eminent panel of men and women and look forward to learning from one another during this session. In Indian tradition, women are believed to be the incarnation of Shakti, the goddess of power, and truly so. We believe that only empowered women can create an empowered society and a strong nation. So I'm proud to say that India is a country where a woman became a president, prime minister, chief ministers of different states, heads of political parties, speakers of House of Parliaments, and all various top businessmen. They have held top positions in every field, be it sports, business, film industry, entrepreneurs, scientists, doctors, name it, and women are at the helm leading. And women are also now doing very well in the fields once dominated by men, such as police, pilots, and combat positions in army. Just want to give you 2 examples. India's Mars mission was largely held by women scientists. And India had the highest percentage of women pilots in the world. And so, of course, there are, as Satish ji pointed out, there are positive and negative aspects both, but I'm really proud of the way women have come forward in India, the way they have performing in India. So we all have women in our lives who inspire us every day, who choose to challenge, who shatter all stereotypes and biases and take on the world one day at a time. So growing up in India and traveling around the world, I have heard of and seen remarkable women of great strength and fortitude who have shaped not only their destiny, but their families, of their nation and of the world. So there are so many women who are raising their voice, paving new roads and igniting change. And I continue to see such women every day and I get inspired from them. Today is the day when we celebrate women's achievement and their extraordinary journeys. But in my view, this shouldn't be limited to one day. Every day is a day for women, and we should celebrate them, celebrate our achievements, our ambitions, our flaws, our uniqueness throughout the year, by improving little by little every day, by supporting and encouraging each other, by being true to ourselves, and just by being us. So while I wish all of you a very happy Women's Day, I also wish that we should try and create a world where all women can be the best versions of themselves, where there is no glass ceilings to shatter, and there are no glass slippers to fit in. And we don't need to celebrate the Women Day. So with these words, I look forward to the stimulating discussions by this distinguished panel on diversity, equity, inclusion. Thank you, CIF, for putting together this meaningful program. I look forward to, and I hope it's a part of your regular calendar. And thank you once again for inviting me to be part of it. Thank you, and best of luck for the panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Apurvaji. Those were really inspiring words. When we hear about Indian women doing so well, it automatically brings a feather, it puts a feather in our caps as well, because it is an inclusive world. When we talk about women just like ourselves doing so much better, it really, really is extremely inspiring. Thank you so much. Now, as we move forward to our discussion on DEI today, we need to understand that the change of the conversation needs to happen, and it needs to happen today. Quoting Martin Luther King Jr., as he said, our lives begin to end when we start staying silent about things that matter. We are excited to start today's discussion on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I would like to introduce our moderator for the evening, Wei Sarma. She is a member of CIF's Board of Governors. Waze leads the operational support strategy and optimization for Lithium by ADP. She worked for many Fortune 500 companies around the globe, helping them make the best use of technology to solve business problems and promote growth. Waze is also the original Benjamin Button of Canada. With the age reversing strategy that she uses daily, it could definitely be our next topic of discussion. Please welcome our panel discussions moderator today, Ms. Wei Sarma.
Well, thank you, Sunita, for the lovely introduction, and of course, my new nickname. We'll have to catch up on that right after our call. Hello, everyone, and welcome to an evening of empowerment, an evening where we choose to challenge the status quo of beliefs and actions that discourages diversity, equity, and inclusion. We choose to challenge the naysayers, statements like, it has always been done this way. In short, every process that is outdated and serves us no more. In the next couple of minutes, you'll hear from some of Ontario's prominent thought leaders on their experiences and proposals on the importance of gender parity, how best to achieve that, and also, most importantly, the role that male allies play in the process. But first of all, let me break the suspense and introduce to you our panel for the evening. Our first guest for evening is someone who needs very less introduction. He's a passionate advocate of diversity and inclusion and goes far and beyond to create equity and prosperity for communities. Though officially he holds the title of the Chief Technology Officer for the City of Toronto, his popularity also lies as a strong ally for empowering women in all fields, government and beyond. Please join me in welcoming TEDx speaker and one of the founding members of CILR, a coalition of innovation leaders against racism, Lawrence Etta. Very nice to have you here, Lawrence, today.
Thank you. Great to be here. Looking forward to this. Thank you, Vase.
Sure. Our next guest for today is a lady who positively fills in the needs for women on boards through her role as a member of the board of directors for the Oakville Hospital Foundation. Also, as the managing partner with the Sigma Group, she's well known for her strong expertise in business development and expansion. Her passion to promote women to leadership roles has been evident through her various community engagements, which she's very vocal about. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Anita Dharamshi.
Thank you, Vase, and thank you to CIF and to all of you for having me here. I'm humbled to be in the company of such incredible and accomplished people. Thank you.
It's very nice to have you here today, Anita. So thanks for joining us. Moving ahead, our third guest for today is an award-winning communications and marketing executive from Toronto. As her current role as the Chief Technology Advisor, she is the flag bearer of an important new movement in the workplace, Entrepreneurship that talks of diversity in innovation and thinking. And she has launched her book, The Greenhouse Approach, How to Cultivate Deliberate Innovation in Organizations. She has been named Bridge Builder for Women by the A-List, a yearly publication that features prominent Indo-Canadians for their various community efforts. Everyone, please welcome Dr. Chitra Anand.
Hi, good evening, and thank you for that very gracious introduction. I'm delighted to be here to contribute to this very important dialogue. Thank you.
Welcome, Chitra. Very nice to have you here today. Our next guest for today is a veteran Canadian higher education lawyer. Apart from acting as regulatory counsel to transaction counsel and investor groups, he has also represented students on human rights, accommodation-related, and discipline issues. A frequent author and speaker across Canada, he co-founded CareerPathIntelligence.com, a platform dedicated to purpose-driven careers and higher education intelligence. Please put your hands together for Harris Rosen. Welcome, Harris.
It's an honor to be here, Vase. I'm humbled. Thank you.
Such a pleasure to have you here amongst us today. All right, ladies and gentlemen, our final guest for the evening is one who has been named as one of the top 10 emerging women entrepreneurs in Canada. She is the founder and chief executive officer of Sahajan Skincare, an Ayurveda-based natural skincare line. A strong advocate of women entrepreneurs, she substantiates her passion for promoting women through various blogs and reports. A recent one that she co-authored, which is also my personal favorite, is Mom's the Word, how organizations can change the impact of motherhood on long-term career success. Please welcome Lisa Matem.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure to be with all of you, and thank you for considering me and such an amazing roster of panelists today.
Welcome, Lisa. Well, on the same note, I would also like to inform our audience that one of our panelists, Mary McPherson, CEO of Oakville Hospital Foundation, could not attend the event today due to a sudden unfavorable health condition, but she sends her full support and best wishes to all of us. So thank you very much, Mary, for your wishes, and we wish you a speedy recovery. Wow, let me take a breath here. That's a powerhouse of thought leaders we have today for the evening. I'm sure our audience is equally thrilled and excited to hear from each one of them, so as I am myself. So without further ado, let's dive straight in. Are we ready, speakers? Perfect, I get the go-ahead sign. All right, let's get started. So Lawrence, I will start with you. Now, when we talk about Toronto, the first thing that comes to mind for anyone is how highly diverse the nature of the city is in terms of its residents as well as the workforce. Now, as the leader of the city, can you tell us your experience on how do you build your network of diverse candidates that prove that your organization or the city of Toronto is worth consideration? And specifically, how do you ensure gender parity?
Well, thank you very much for the question, Vase. And the City of Toronto is definitely committed to fostering an inclusive, accessible environment where all our employees and members of the public feel valued and also respected and supported. So we're very dedicated to building that workforce that does reflect the diversity of the public and the communities in which we serve. That's why we're public servants. So I'm just going to list some of the areas of some of the work that will help sort of respond to your question. So the city was named one of Canada's top employees and best diversity employers. We have something called the Workforce Equity and Inclusion Plan, which outlines key objectives for accelerating progress towards the goals of representing at all levels of the organization the diversity of the population. So we have to reflect the people we serve in our workforce. The city is also developing a first gender equity strategy, beginning with the establishment of a gender equity unit. This unit will lead the development and ongoing sustainment of gender equity. The unit will also address intersectional gender inequities in the city's programs and how we deliver our service, and also our workforce in that representation. We're also forming as well, and we have contributed to a group called WITNET. As the Chief Technology Officer in the division called Technology Services, we are members of a chapter of the Toronto Network of Women, which fosters a network forum for women in technology across the city, the divisions and the agencies. It supports professional development, access to internal role models, mentors, sponsors, etc. We've also made a purposeful decision to add verbiage in all senior level positions for diversity and inclusion. So when we make postings and we look in terms of the future leaders, the diversity and inclusion strategy at a senior level is very much first and foremost. Also as well, the interview panels. You have to really have targeted recruitment where the interview panels are a reflection of that diversity and inclusion. So these are just some examples of some of the ways the City of Toronto is committed to diversity, inclusion, and having a diverse, broad candidates so that we reflect the public we serve.
Thank you very much. That was a very loaded answer you actually gave us with a lot of different, areas that a city is actually, trying to get the claws on, right, on different diversity issues. So fantastic to hear that. And I remember during our many different interactions that you and we have had in the past, the way you actually mentioned to me different times on how the city has been trying, to cover different areas so that nobody feels left out. So this is great information. Thank you very much for that, Lawrence. Just to follow up on that, so the different, or specifically the network of women's, coalition that you just spoke about that the city has in terms of women in technology, and that's a topic that we'll be covering later in our conversation today. Where can we find that information for the interest of our audience? Is that all in the city's website we could go to and maybe take a look?
If you Google, it's at TO Now. If you Google that, and WITNET, WITNET. And just to mention as well is that one of the viewpoint is that the narrative sometimes is that you can't find sort of women in sort of technology, and you and I have had that conversation. You're in the field. My deputy chief technology officers are both women from diverse backgrounds. So if I look at it in terms of the deputy roles, they are strong women from diverse backgrounds, inclusive backgrounds that are very, strong in the technology field and doing great work. So WITNET, WITNET, if you Google that, there's lots of information you can get from that area. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I hope our audience have actually made a note of that, because that's very useful information. So moving on to, talking about women and workplace. Now, I remember reading a report, which was, I think, a couple of years back, which was published by Deloitte on Women on Board survey, some time back, which actually said, it's a very powerful statement and my personal favorite as well. It said something like this: gender diversity on boards doubled in organizations with female leadership. Now, mind you, that's a real powerful statement. And I put this question to you, Anita. So you sit at the board of Oakville Hospital Foundation, which is managed by a female CEO. So can you tell us your perspective on the statement that I just read?
Sure.
What do you think about it?
So I couldn't agree more. I think it shouldn't come as a surprise to any of us, the statement that you said, Vaz, where when you have female representation at the leadership level in an organization, that only disseminates down. So you start to see within the organization, there's more diversity, there's more inclusion, not just female, but you see sort of across the board. So as you mentioned, I do sit on the Oakville Hospital Foundation board, and yes, Mary is the CEO. It's unfortunate she couldn't be with us here today. But I believe what's happening at the Oakville Hospital board is something that you're actually starting to see across the organization. So it's not just in, the nonprofit and the charitable, but in the for-profit as well, which I think all of us are seeing. And I think, Lawrence, it's what you sort of touched on as well, is that as organizations are realizing more and more that we need to be a reflection of the communities and the societies that we're in. So whether it's, a business, whether it's, something like the Oakville Hospital Foundation, organizations sort of look outside and say, okay, how can we be reflective of the communities that we're in? Because ultimately, people want to do work with, you know, speak to or have relations with organizations that reflect them, that they can relate to. So if I as a female see that there's female representation, you know, at the leadership level, at the C level, at the board level, now I'm feeling like, okay, this is an organization that I can relate to, me as a female, and you know, in cases of me as a South Asian as well, you start to see that relatability, and I think that people are also viewing that these differences are actually an asset. And so what's been, you know, previously viewed as possibly, you know, as a liability maybe, I think more and more people are realizing that that diversity, that inclusion, you know, the different genders, different ethnicities, all of that sort of forms the basis and the foundation for a lot of innovation, a lot of ideation, a lot of the stuff that's happening in a lot of these organizations. And again, it starts at the leadership level, because when you have female representation at the leadership level, then it's those people that are making the decisions. It's those people that are looking at, okay, how do we need to bring about change? How do we need to be more inclusive as a society? And you know, it starts like any organization, it starts from the top down. So when you see it at the top, that's where the change really starts to happen and kind of, you know, trickle down, if you will.
Very, very well said, Anita, and thanks for that. And I completely agree. The fact that, you know, there has to be inclusion and the change needs to start from the top, right? So it definitely trickles down at all levels. But here is something that I have a question in mind when I actually hear about inclusion in all sectors. There could be certain areas wherein, is there always an inclusion? Are people always welcoming? Now, specifically, you know, let's talk about women in technology, you know, something that Lawrence briefly touched on.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a personal experience, you know, back, just rewind a couple years back, when I joined in my first technology job. I still remember, you know, finding myself in a room full of men. And the first question that I got directly on my face was, what are you doing here? It was not that, don't get me wrong, it wasn't that my colleagues were not, you know, interested in having me in, but they couldn't fathom the idea that I, as a female, was entering into a male's world.
Mm-hmm.
So let me put this question to you, Chitra. So how do you think, you know, given your experience in the different multinationals that you have worked in, you know, right from Microsoft, which is a tech giant, you have worked in TELUS, you know, it's a telecom company. How do you think has the world or the organizations come from where it started, you know, to now in embracing women in STEM or women in technology? What's your take on that?
Thank you for the question. You know, it's a very interesting question for me. I've grown up in the technology industry. I've spent 20 years or so in tech. And I've always been supported as a female. Now I go back, you know, 10 years ago when I was at TELUS and I started there, and it was very much male dominated. I was the only female at the table many times. But that paradigm never stopped me from achieving what it is that I needed to do. And I think it's really important to really think about the lens through which you see the world. It's either opportunity or, you know, it's a potential liability. And for me, I was always very focused on, you know, I have something to say, I have a contribution to make. I was very strong. I've always been very strong in my thoughts and my opinions, and I was never afraid to voice them. And so when you have that sort of conviction, that trumps everything that you possibly do. And when you think about outcomes, you know, my outcome is X. And when you lead with that lens, everything else sort of falls into place. So I never was really fixated on the fact that I was a minority in many respects, rather that it's my forte. And, you know, it's interesting. And if I go back to my roots, because everything is rooted in how you were born and raised. And I come from a very traditional Indian family, but I was never told by my father or even my mother that I'm at a disadvantage because I'm a female. It was, you're capable, you're the world is your oyster and do what you need to do. Understanding that there may be limitations, because if you want to have a family, and timing would be the only limitation in how you prioritize what it is that you want to achieve. So for me, it's really around the constructs through which you see the world, and how do you take that lens and sort of carry that through your professional lives. So I go back to my time at TELUS, and I can confidently say that I was never treated differently because I'm female or I'm a visible minority. And I can say the same thing for my time at Microsoft. And maybe it's because of the lens through which I see the world. And I'm so focused on achieving what it is that I want to do. So my efforts are focused around that. So I really believe that there always has been opportunities. I mean, I'm not saying they're not challenges. There are, but it's really how you approach these challenges. It's really looking at the tools that you have and the mindset that you take in order to overcome them. For me, my mentors have always been men. The greatest mentors that I've had and allies that I've had have been men. When I wanted that promotion, when I needed to get some insight on a particular issue or career track, men in my career trajectory have always been extremely supportive. So for me, when I look at the industry, I think that, the whole dialogue is, percentage of women in leadership roles, why is it low? I mean, I think we have to apply first principles thinking and go back to what the root causes are. Are the opportunities there? I mean, we have to ask the right questions in order to offer the right solutions. And so that's the mindset from which I come from. So for me, my personal opinion on this topic is that the opportunities have always been there. And it's really about finding the right path, the right route, the right supporters, the right sponsors that are going to help you achieve what it is that you'd like to do.
Thanks for that, Chitra. And I especially like the perspective that you brought in. It's not only about how you are seen, but how you see or take it as well, right? So that brings a very different viewpoint. So I really like exactly what you said. We have some other technologists in here as well. Anybody wants to add anything to what Chitra said in terms of women in technology?
I would like to just follow and thank you, Chitra, and the rest of the panelists, the esteemed panelists. Key word is the right sponsor as well, because often what happens, there's a separation between a mentor. A mentor is really there trying to bring out in you what you see is that best of you. But the sponsor is the one that is really sort of trying to shape, advocate for you at the boardroom, at the senior, advocate that you can bring those right skill sets. And in any organization, especially extremely large, complex organization, that sponsorship can be very effective in terms of really trying to advocate your skills, what you bring, what is the right approach you can bring to those results-based outcomes. So I just want to expand on that. The sponsorship is often something that people don't talk as much. So it was great to hear that from Chitra, really saying that the right sponsorship will help you drive those outcomes as well. So just wanted to add to that.
Fantastic, thank you. Anita, you want anything to add?
Yeah, no, I just actually, I couldn't agree with you. I would say 1000%, Chitra, on exactly what she said. I think perspective is such a big part of it. I also, in a previous life, did spend a lot of my time in technology, coming in from a background of technology. And I found, earlier on in my career, like you, I would walk into a room and it would all be, male. I was the only female in the room. And I found that my biggest obstacle was there really wasn't. It was actually up here. It was myself. It was me thinking that, oh, you know, they're going to discount me because I'm a female. They're going to discount me because of my age. They're going to discount me because of all of these reasons. But then I had a very candid conversation with my father, who's actually one of my mentors as well, very early on in my career. And he actually sat me down, and I think it goes back to kind of, you know, the upbringing and the environment that you're in. And he said to me early on, he said, you can do anything you want. You can be whoever you want to be. So don't walk into a room thinking about what you're not. Focus on what you are and what you have and what you're capable of, because anytime you walk into a room, you should always feel, you know, there's nobody better than you, there's nobody worse than you. We're all equals. And I feel that as females especially, we are sometimes our own worst enemies, if you will, and a lot of it is just it's just what we have in our minds, which sometimes prevents us from going for those opportunities, going for the promotion, asking for that, you know, asking to be put on that project, right? You know, anecdotally, I have this conversation with people all the time where, you know, you hear about that situation where, you know, the male went for the promotion because he looked at the 4 things he had, but the female didn't because she focused on the 2 things that she didn't in the list. And I think that's so, unfortunately, it's still so much how many females view themselves.
Absolutely, absolutely. So well said. And that's a perfect segue to the next question I have in mind, and probably I'll post that to you, Harris, in terms of, what do you feel that women brings in something very different to the table than men in the C-suite?
Well, before I get there, I just want to thank Chitra and Anita for addressing the issue of mindset. I mean, there's a whole body of literature, both male and female, on the question of mindset. And I think it's so relevant to this discussion. But in 2 words, Vase, empathy and listening. And, you know, I try to resist stereotypes, but I think women are far better at both. And strangely, I learned this by becoming vegan and not as a lawyer. And I'm going to get some chuckles, I realize. But prior to that, and despite handling a myriad of human rights cases in my law practice, I didn't really understand what inclusion meant. I was the last person anyone would have expected to live a plant-based lifestyle, for starters. I was the downtown Toronto law firm partner who took clients for steak and Cabernet. And so I became an unabashed tree hugger. Again, I'll try to resist labels, but I did become something of a tree hugger while living in Northern California for 3 years. And there was a turning point for me, and that was recently. In 2020, I hosted a dynamic woman from Johannesburg on my startup platform. And she was the CEO of a non-governmental organization that created 50,000 jobs in literally the most unequal country on earth, South Africa. And I have never seen anyone with as much operational talent, probably in my life or my career. And so before I knew it, she was selflessly helping to propel my business, and things just clicked. Very strangely, perhaps, because from halfway around the world, you know, in the COVID era on Zoom. But the essence of your question is answered maybe with a question. What was her secret sauce? What is her secret sauce? Well, she is well educated at a tier 1. She has a top tier MBA from Europe. But even before that, she cares about people and she listens to people. And I feel that if more men park their egos and listen to women, perhaps my wife tells me this every day, but it is true. If more men park their egos, they might build more trust and certainly better organization. For sure, better organizations. And fast forwarding, I mean, today, that same individual assumes many of the C-suite functions of my business from Johannesburg, and she has skills that I just don't have. And so she's enabled me to maintain a captive law practice in Toronto, halfway around the world, representing private equity groups and educational institutions. So, you know, I'm inspired not just by this individual, but there are many individuals, Dr. CJ Meadows in Singapore, who is a pioneer in design thinking. New York's Kelly McNamara, another Ivy Leaguer who is research focused on how plant-based foods can change the world. I've got a long list, but I have to mention my wife as well, who advocates fiercely for animals, for those who cannot speak. So these are among my heroines, and these are certainly the role models for my 10-year-old twin girls. So I hope I've addressed that question sufficiently.
You did very well, Harris, and I specifically like what you said about empathy. That's a very powerful value word, actually, that could be brought in, you know, that women really brings, and I believe personally, to the workplace, you know, for higher commitment, cooperation, and team building. You know, you need to be empathetic towards, you know, your people at work or beyond, you know, so I would totally agree with what you said. Well, let's change directions a little bit here, right? So we had been talking so far about, you know, the challenges faced by women in different sectors and different fields, what women can bring in, et cetera, and stuff. So let's flip the discussion on its head a little bit and talk about an industry which, you know, as is perceived, so to say, maybe a little bit favorable towards women, or maybe that's not the case. So Lisa, let me turn to you. So you are in the cosmetics industry, which is patronized by women. So does that mean success comes to you easy, or do you still face challenges? Just help us understand what happens in that world.
Sure. So thank you. And that's a really great question. I would say, you know, it's been interesting hearing the different perspectives from the different panelists. And I'm of the mindset, you know, you mentioned earlier, I've written about women in the workplace, and in my previous life prior to cosmetics spent a lot of time in D&I. So I'm a big believer that with anything, there's a little bit of what I think of as like a push and pull. So I think for women, mindset is extremely important, because we have to be able to sort of lean our hands forward and create opportunity for ourselves and demonstrate that we want it. And I think for organizations, the requirement is to sort of look back and see, sometimes there isn't always that inclusive environment, or sometimes there is bias that's present within an organization, often unconscious, that makes it difficult for women. And so in the beauty industry, you know, it's been an incredible journey for me, because I started my career in pharmaceuticals, and then I went into consulting, and am now here. And it's been an interesting world to navigate, because much like you said, you know, I think, don't quote me on my exact numbers, but I was in the first cohort of the Sephora incubator program. And what was interesting about the program is it was meant to really help to incubate early stage female founded beauty businesses. But the reason why they did it is because they recognized, and I'm sure many of you have either patronized a Sephora or have, you know, sisters or wives or daughters or cousins who have, the number is crazy. Like, well, I'd say it's something like, well, almost 98% of their customers are women. Over 80% of the brands in Sephora are actually run by men. And so it's quite surprising to find that an industry that is so, you know, that is, you know, that needs women for its existence, essentially, you know, would be still so heavily led by men. And I think there's a lot of learning there. And I think part of it is, and I've seen this as a female founder, is there is a mindset piece, and Chitra nicely spoke to it, that I think sometimes, you know, whether it's male beauty entrepreneurs and you know, sometimes think bigger or lean forward, or aren't afraid of their own limitations within it. But there's also an element, I think, and I do think that there's, you know, biases that come into play. I remember I was in San Francisco 2 years ago, and I was actually sitting with an old friend. We were just chatting, and I was going to meet some investors after, and the friend had said to me, like, oh my gosh, aren't you concerned, because most of these investors haven't even sat across the table from a woman. And, as it is, there's a lot of concrete data that says when women and men both do a pitch for venture capital money, even if the pitches are the same, they're viewed differently, where the sort of man is sometimes seen as the visionary, the woman is sometimes seen as naive. So I think it's quite a complex and a nuanced ball, which we all sort of have a responsibility of sort of unraveling. And I think that's something that's exciting about a conversation like today, is we can all look and see what piece we can play, whether it's ourselves or whether it's in leading others. What I do think that has been fascinating to me, even particularly in the last year of COVID, is I do think that women do align. And I think in general, I think we align around familiar. So I think as a Canadian-owned business, for example, I found in the last year with COVID that as people find out that we're a Canadian business, made in Canada, produced in Canada, people, Canadians like to support us. I think women, when they recognize that the business is female founded and they know that sometimes there's challenges associated to being a female founded business, we like to lift others when we understand their stories, when we feel familiar to them. And so while I would say there has been some surprises, and certainly that beauty is strongly led by men was a surprise to me, and some of the nuances and challenges in there, I've also been really excited and really grateful for some of the support I found, both from men and women who've looked at the opportunity, or who've just sort of said, yeah, we want to rally and really support you. And I have a number of female founder friends who also have similar type experiences where, yes, they may face challenges, but they've also recognized that there's you talk about, challenge, there's a groundswell of people challenging the status quo. And I think the more that we do that, the more we create an equal playing field for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That was very informative and eye-opening to even understand that, the quote unquote numbers you gave about the, the businesses are actually managed and run by men. That was very surprising for me, because I would have not guessed that. Any comments from anybody else on this very interesting topic?
Yeah, I would like to comment. It's really fascinating what Lisa said, whereby she talked about once people understand that the business is female-led, female-founded, and also made in Canada, they're supportive, which for me as somebody in government, it speaks to community. What I hear is that people want to support Lisa because it's a community. We all feel a sense of pride and one in her and her business because it's made in Canada. And I'm sure that there's a lot of competition in the space that you're in, Lisa. You're going with the big, the big conglomerates organization. So COVID has really shown is that the community rallies. And I think that to have diversity, equity, and inclusion, it really comes from a community lens, because the more of the community, the broad community, and that's what Canada is. It's, we're in the Canada-India Foundation here. It's about we're all immigrants, and technically speaking, it's really the indigenous groups that are the sort of holders of this land, that we want to support the community. So that's something that I really got from that. And Lisa, thank you for sharing your story and some of the areas and there. So just wanted to add to that, Vase, and for the panel.
Thank you, Lawrence. Harris, was that something you wanted to say, or?
No, just great comments, Lisa.
All right, thanks for that. Sorry. I think that's a perfect segue to the next question that I have in mind about, organizations and their, their attitude or behavior towards supporting DEI or different initiatives that they're trying to embrace these days. So this would be a question I would direct to Harris, given your background as a lawyer. Are organizations legally bound in Ontario or Canada to follow DEI practices in their businesses, or is it more of a choice that they make?
Well, thanks, Vase. Do we have 4 hours? No, right? So
Get started.
There's a practical and a legal answer to that question. So the legal answer is yes. The practical answer is that we have some distance to still travel. And let's start with the practical before we get to the legal, because effective lawyering, in my humble opinion, is 95% practical and 5% legal. So full disclosure, I'm humbled to be amidst such a great company here. And diversity, equity, and inclusion are not my core legal expertise. I have, however, and routinely represent many higher education institutions on accommodation and discrimination cases that envelop inclusion, okay? So the practical answer first, the bad news and then the good news. Legal remedies really, unfortunately, in this country still support the status quo, in my opinion. Canada is a great country, but it is still as much about order and deference to the Queen as it is to justice. And if you came looking for justice, even amidst one of the most judicious legal systems in the world, which I would respectfully suggest that it is, you may be sorely disappointed. So now the glass half full. Here's an expression that I love, and I hope that the other panelists would share my views. Just because someone has a legal right to do something does not make it right to do. And imagine how much happier to that end employees and students in the context of schools would be if we did things because they were right to do, whether or not we were legally obliged as organizations to do them, right? So for example, and I'm using an example maybe selfishly in my world, if veganism was not necessarily an enumerated ground of basis for legal accommodation under the Human Rights Code, I'm confident that women in the C-suite would figure out, many women in the C-suite, because they have, would figure out why it is so important to still provide accommodation. So the statutes that are germane to this question, very briefly, the Ontario Human Rights Code, the Occupational Health and Safety Act, the Pay Equity Act, and the Employment Standards Act. But I'll zero in very narrowly on the Human Rights Code because the Human Rights Code is all about one word, in my opinion, if I had to reduce this, dignity. And there's a 2005 case, R.V. Spence in the Supreme Court of Canada, which to this day is good law, recognizes that discrimination against racial minorities is a social fact. And so there are really two aspects to that. There's discrimination. People cannot be discriminated against based on any number of enumerated grounds. Okay, race, color, ancestry, creed, place of origin, ethnic origin. And secondly, an organization has a positive duty to legally accommodate students or employees, as the case may be, to the point of undue hardship. So organizations, I think, have to educate themselves and their employees on the laws relating to DEI, but let's also think about what is right to do. Let's not just do it because it's the law. Let's do this because it is the right thing to do. And in the wake of COVID, I surmise what I've seen is I've seen something great happen amidst the tragedies of COVID, namely greater accountability, consumers and clients holding organizations feet to the fire, greater accountability. I don't know if that view is shared by everybody, but it's certainly my view.
Thank you very much. It's actually good to know about the responsibilities legally or beyond that organizations have, right, in terms of following DEI practices. And it's true, it's not easy for organizations to just say, hey, let's follow what sells in the market. That's not totally always possible, right? You have to embrace as well as make sure that it really aligns with your business practices and how you actually bring in or tap in the skill sets or the value that diversity candidates can bring in, and then you weave it into the culture of the organization. So that's not an easy job for organizations to do, but it's very good to hear that organizations are doing, and as well as the policies around it, right? So
that's my perception. I don't know if that's shared, but I think COVID has really been a game changer. Horrific tragedies, obviously, but but sometimes from tragedy, some wonderful things emerge. And, you know, I really see consumers holding, I don't know, does everybody, do the other panelists share my view? Maybe not.
I'll maybe add, you know, this, there is, it's a great feedback you've provided, Harris. I've always believed that if you want to talk on this space, you also need a good lawyer in terms of there. So I'm going to remember you for in the future, because I think, you know, the way you've articulated the very complex legal framework sometimes in simple, practical terms are important. There's two things that I think it's interesting you mentioned: do the right thing. And I think the do the right thing comes into the organizational culture. Is one of the things. And in Toronto, we talk about value system. What is the value? Because sometimes do the right thing isn't so, it's an abstract that sort of, it's almost like it makes sense, but it's really about the culture you instill in an organization to say, is it the right things to do? And I've been in lots of conversations where you have the legal opinion, but it just comes down to the point is that in your heart, is this the right thing to do? You know, there is a legal aspects. And I think that's what I'm getting from you. I may be wrong in terms of there, but I think that's what I'm hearing, saying that the common sense has to sometimes dictate. And then the final component, I think, through this pandemic that speaks into the essence of what you've spoken is the way of diversity and inclusion linking into empathy leadership. Because if you have empathy and that's based into your culture, then the right thing through your DNA will come. And I think what I've found in this pandemic is that even your communication style, your empathy, your culture, and your tone will embrace diversity and inclusion because you're having an empathetic lens into how you're trying to treat people, which will lead into doing the right thing. So I'll leave those statements and certainly welcome my colleagues on the panels to see if what their thoughts. And I'm not sure, Harris, if that sort of aligns with sort of what your legal advice and messaging has been.
Lawrence, thank you for those comments. If I can just, I'll try to get this in 30 seconds or less. But in my world, I know we're challenged for time. In the education space, there has been a movement. I lived in Northern California for 3 years, and this social emotional learning movement is a wonderful thing. And I saw my kids go through the school system in Northern California for 3 years. And that's happening here as well. And I'd like to see more of it. But the theory is really this simple, that before you can have IQ and base DQ, right, digital quotient, you need to have emotional quotient at the bottom of the pyramid. And I really do subscribe to that view.
Excellent views. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say one thing, if I may, around this statement of doing the right thing. You know, in my experiences and in my point of view, I feel like that is that term, doing the right thing, is very subjective and can, at times, you know, when you leave it to people's discretion, at times at discretion, and that leads to ambiguity, and then produces the, you know, maybe not the optimal results. So while it has good intention, from what I've seen, it yields the incorrect output. So I'll give an example. So if we, you know, have certain quotas that we have to fill, I don't think that lends to achieving the right output. You know, if you want to have a more diverse workforce, by ticking boxes is not going to really solve the problem. And so I think I mentioned this earlier, is you have to go to the root of problems on why certain positions are not more diverse. I mean, that's, you know, you have to go back to the root of it. Is it because of opportunities? Is it a skill gap? Is it that women are struggling with, you know, there's other variables, you know, it's not a black and white problem. It's very complex. There are many variables. You know, we're multidimensional, and human beings are. So there's a lot of different factors that play into that. And if I may offer, you know, the two most valuable resources are really time and energy. And so time and energy lends in different ways as we approach the workforce. You know, if you want to have more women in leadership positions, that requires time and energy. And the question then becomes, you know, how do you want to spend your time and energy? Whether it's, you know, when you're in these very, and I've seen this and I've experienced it myself in these very high leadership roles, you know, it's kind of like the pie chart. You know, you have to look at it from, you know, how much of your time is spent in the workplace when you're in those leadership roles, because those require time and energy. But then you have other parts of your life, whether you're a mother or you're caring for aging parents or whatever that might be, and it comes down to time and energy. And how do you divide that up? So is there something at the root of that problem that needs to be addressed before we start, you know, offering different, you know, boxes that need to be checked as a result of that. So it's a very complex, multi-dimensional problem that needs greater sort of, you know, critical thinking, as I would put it, before we start to really, you know, talk about.
Yeah, absolutely, Chitra, and very well summarized, you know, in very few words. And there, I'm just being mindful of time. We're pretty much, you know, at the end of our session here. But before, you know, we actually wrap it up, there's a very important topic I also wanted to cover quickly in terms of male allyship. So I will throw it out openly to all the 5 panelists, and feel free to take it. How have you been a true male ally? Or, you know, for our female panelists, how have your partners been a true male ally in the true sense of the word during COVID, while you're trying to balance your work as well as home? How have you actually partnered with your partners to bring this into effect?
I'll start.
Anybody?
I'll go.
Sure.
So, you know, I would say I have a very supportive partner. We don't look at gender roles in our professional lives and in our family lives. You know, we look at what needs to happen, what needs to be done, and who has the time and energy to support each other. You know, when I was at Microsoft, you know, so I mean, even what's happening in our work home right now, if I need to take meetings or if I have to work, you know, it's just a really equal sort of playing field, where we are focused on what needs to happen and what's in the best interest for the family and our professional lives. So it's a very equalized environment. And we have 2 young boys as well. And so that's equally important for them to see that there's no really division of labor. It's just what needs to happen in the unit. Where work and personal lives are now bleeding incredibly, and they see that as, you know, it's not about gender roles. It's really about what needs to happen, and we just do it wholeheartedly.
Fantastic. I hope your partner is listening and agrees to all of what you have said. Between Harris and Lawrence, any one of you would like to comment? How have you been helping out being a male ally, a true male ally?
Harris, you.
Yeah.
Okay. I definitely think that at this time it's also about ensuring that the allyship comes as well in understanding there is a mental health component through this, and that it is balanced in the sense of we all have the responsibilities on both roles, and both our partners are just as equal and just as demanding. We're all trying to achieve the same things in having the common goal. So from an allyship, it's really about knowing a schedule. So, you know, I'm a bit more of a morning person. So there's certain things that I just get up in the morning, and compared to, you know, my partner who's more of a later piece. So it speaks to really about that teamwork and that cadence in that respect. In terms of also as well as that from a professional standpoint, for me, the allyship has really come with being very prescriptive in really going to find top talent from an allyship in terms of women. I've heard this viewpoints that they can't find women in tech, etc. And I'm very prescriptive. I think if you're not prescriptive about that, it suddenly just happens, or you say, well, I don't know why. So it's really going into the areas where it's a supply and demand, and really saying, I really want to ensure that there's diversity, there's women, and there's women of color. How am I going to go about that? And I'll give a story to finish off. When I was looking for certain roles, and I would have sort of resumes back, I would sometimes push back and say, no, we have to go further. Where are the institutions? Where are the areas that we would have a greater level of supply? So for me, that allyship takes a very active position, whether it's in your home life or whether professionally.
Vase, if I can just piggyback on Lawrence's excellent comments. Let's embrace not only male allyship with women, but I think this is also about, and particularly in the case of Canada, demographically, cross-generational allyship. And in fact, your very foundation, this wonderful foundation that is hosting us tonight, is really predicated on Canada's mosaic. Canada is a multicultural country with an aging demographic. 1 in 4 Canadians will be over the age of 65 by 2030 if we do not embrace the mosaic and immigration. And that's why there's such a push, among other reasons, for international students in my world. But let me also leave the panel with one story that I think really speaks to this. And that is that just 8 years ago, a 52-year-old Stanford legend named Chip Conley imparted his wisdom to a 26-year-old named Brian Chesky. And the result, a small company called Airbnb today, 8 years later. And he did this long after he sold the second largest boutique hotel chain in the United States. So to me, the concept of male allyship is there are parallels. It's parallel to the important issue of cross-generational and cross-cultural workforce.
Fantastic and very well said. Again, it has been a very, very powerful, interesting, and informative evening. I would like to thank all of our panelists. And like they say, all good things come to an end. So does our session, even though we ran over by a little bit of time. I apologize for that. But on behalf of the audience and myself, I would like to thank all of our guests for spending the evening with us and sharing your knowledge and experience on this very important topic. I wish we could continue a little bit more, but it is what it is, right? Everything comes to an end. But that is something also I'd like to remind everybody and every listener that we have in here, that this should be a call to action. Let it not just end with us ending the webinar today. Such discussion should not be limited, to a day or to a month, just wait for the whole month, whole year, and one fine day on March, we decide to celebrate and use this very definite day for a discussion. It should not be that. It should be a call to action, and let us continue challenging what we see incorrect every day and today. So thank you very much, everyone. I really appreciate your time and sharing with us your experience. It was an evening very well spent. So thank you, and over to you, Sunita.
Thank you, Vase, and a big thank you to all our panelists today. It really was an extremely powerful conversation. I think the 1 hour was a bit too short for us. It could have gone on for a few more hours, and I'm sure we would have learned some more insight into DEI. So I'm going to end this night by inviting our convener, our national convener, Ritesh Malik, to do the closing remarks for today. Mr. Ritesh Malik.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ritesh Malik, National Convener at Canada India Foundation. Thank you, Vase, for moderating this excellent session, and a big thank you to all our eminent panelists today. This has been one of the most heartwarming sessions we've had in a long time at CIF. I must admit that. Thanks to each one of you for sharing your wonderful energy and warmth. I have been doing this task of giving vote of thanks since I assumed my responsibilities as National Convener at CIF. But today I think it's more like a gratitude ceremony to celebrate the presence of all the wonderful women in our life. Thanks to all the mothers out there, wives, sisters, daughters, and every single relationship and role in our lives where we see women giving their best and making everything complete and most beautiful. As shared by Apurva ji, not just on Women's Day, we should be grateful on daily basis for all these blessings in our life. As we close our event today, once again, thank you everyone for joining in. And remember, we are the change that we seek in the world. It begins with us. Make sure we all promote, support, and live diversity, equity, and inclusion in our life every day. I would also like to thank Y Media for covering this event live on their channel today. Stay tuned for our upcoming webinar on pandemic responses and initiatives on March 10th at 8:30 p.m. and another webinar on the economy and the virus with Mr. Benjamin Tell, Managing Director, CIBC, on 11th March at 10 a.m. Besides our ongoing Ayurveda speaker series every second Sunday morning. Thank you all once again with all my heart. Stay well, stay safe, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.